Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dead podcast. Today's episode is a little bit different. It's another audio-only version for those of you that just listen with your ear holes. Me and Blank and Damp are all a little bit sick preceding TwitchCon and a wedding, I believe, for you, right, Blank?
Yeah, that's right. Funnily, it just all hit us at the same time. Pretty incredible, to be quite honest with you. It's like round two, realistically, of the big illness that we don't talk about. Hopefully this one doesn't span over 4 years, but I'm already
That'd
feeling
be
better.
nice.
So,
yeah,
you know, it's been like, I want to say like 5 days, but I was pulling the old sick Victorian child day one, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of, I got calmed because I was like, what do you mean you're ill?
Yeah,
and then immediately got ill. So
yeah, you
bit of
did
a
give it
nightmare.
large. You did give it large about your ironclad immune system, and then you came on the mic the next day, and I was like, "That's a sniffly nose right there."
It's true. It's true.
Yeah,
I've taken it
not
on the
good.
chin quite quickly, though. I'm feeling a lot better in like a space of a couple of days. So
Yeah.
can't complain. Can't complain. And I'll tell you what, it was worth it in its own way. Obviously, unfortunately, you weren't there this time, but we'll get you out next time, Blank. It was quite nice. We bumped into some more people. You remember I was saying back in Finland, obviously, I bumped into the admin homie from Turkey that was out in Finland doing like an exchange program. Whole load of people this time around. A lot of deadheads out in the world. It seems like there is a bubbling of excitement for Deadlock now. We got to meet a couple of people that came over. It was kind of cool. It's different. It's very different. It's fun kind of gauging the reception of Deadlock from sort of the wider player pool in real life. Real life.
The real people of Deadlock.
I know.
It's like the reality TV show that needs to come out at some point. It's interesting. Honestly, I think the community for Deadlock is probably one of the best out there currently. And I don't want to name any names for other games, realistically, but like I think one of my favorite parts right now of Deadlock, in particular, just like the fact that you went out there, you saw a load of people, they were friendly. That's very cool. Very cool. Hopefully, you know, we are approachable in the future. And I do get to go to a TwitchCon at some point. That would be the dream. But I think the best thing about the community, though, in my opinion, all right, don't attack me in the comments, please. It's probably the fan art community, because they are driving an entire lore sphere at the moment, which is unreal. There's so many cool drawings out there, and just pretty much, let's just say, like comics of Deadlock that people are making. It's very original. I think that will help in the future as well, because you can definitely tell that Valve takes inspiration for these stuff as well, to throw it back into the game. And I think that it is fantastic. It is fantastic. Really, really cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's sick because we even saw that firsthand, right? Like, you remember when Toasty was like super, just whipping out like all these cool designs, like his sort of inky style of the way he does stuff, very kind of tattoo-y, like Hellboy-esque sort of theme. And then they obviously approached him, didn't they? And they put the How to Play Abrams and Ivy drawings in, and they're still in the client now, and that's cool. Like stuff like that, where it sort of shaped a little bit of that visual direction. And I think you're right, you know, where there probably is a degree of where what Deadlock's lore and sort of universe is going to be is still up for debate, even at like Valve HQ, where they're kind of figuring it all out, because they were adapting a lot of like Neon Prime and then ideas they had that maybe they scrapped or they wanted to go with. So it feels like everyone's kind of had an impact in some way on this game, where it really does feel like the first sort of big publicly developed Valve game, and you can see the pieces of everyone's input. So it's kind of crazy, really.
Yeah, and it surprised me as well, because I think that, you know, Abrams and Dynamo being the sole focus, realistically, a lot of this fan art was just not where I thought things were going at all. But, you know, people were really big fans. I do think that, you know, Abrams is such a dynamic character anyway, that it sort of makes sense to me that people would like to would probably resonate with him, honestly, because, you know, he's a buff guy, but he's misunderstood, you know, didn't want to be this demon at the end of the day, just wants to get rid of his damn buck, man. But yeah, I like it a lot. I also love that people are really big into Dynamo. That's another one. But again, he's also a dynamic character with like the whole lore behind his wife and how he became a robot in the first place. It's unreal that they can have like this kind of depth of lore this early in the game. It's very nice. But it's again, I think the key word there is original, Jacky, because I think we have a lot of like spin-off type games coming out, but you don't have like something that's got. You say what you want about Deadlock at the moment, but I think the one thing that you have to admit is that it is one of the most original and already quite well put together in terms of characters, in terms of heroes, because you don't get that. You don't get that on a lot of other games these days. You just have faces, and it's like this person, that they're a wacky starfighter, and it's like, yeah, I don't really care about that. And it's like, this robot used to be a guy, and he's got a loving wife, but then he by quantum entanglement turned himself into a robot, and this is who he is now. It's like, okay, interesting.
They had to build a body to contain the collapsing star that is his consciousness. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's why it's so funny that when you think back, right, obviously, like, we kind of go through those trends in gaming and media where one thing is the it thing because it's been underground for so long, and then it becomes really popular. I think it's like how, you know, like back in the day when like Call of Duty Zombies and stuff like that was blowing up, like the zombies trend really hit a mark in the early 2000s where it was like Dead Rising came out, sort of, even nearly got sued by John Romero, I think, where he was like, you're ripping off Day of the Dead. And all these games started coming up with their like in-depth sort of, you know, exaggeration of the zombies archetype as far as you could push it. Yeah. Which also, do you remember the trailer for that when it like shattered the world? Everyone was like, this game is going to be the next like Resident Evil, like crazy game. And then it came out and it was obviously just like a really buggy survival horror co-op game. And everyone was very disappointed. I didn't mind it. It was all right,
my opinion. Yeah, same. Dead Island 2 was a mess, but Dead Island 1 was very good.
You know the crazy thing with that as well? I remember playing like the old build of it at Gamescom like 2011 when it first got announced, which also had a like sick trailer, by the way. It was like, I'm the bomb, I'm about to blow up. They had a fake Jack Black voice actor doing one of the characters. Everyone was freaking out. They were like, JB's in it. Turns out it wasn't. And then obviously they scrapped it for years, and that was in development hell for nearly a good like 10 years, I think. Because I think that came out like 2021, right?
They don't do trailers like that anymore. Do you remember Mercenaries 2?
Yeah, also a banger. That was
also
sick.
A banger.
But that was also a very good game.
Theme tune behind it as well, which was great.
The Mercenaries like music, that song actually went hard. I had that in a playlist for years.
Yeah. I still got it in one. Comes on.
It's a banger. Yeah. But I feel like that's No. Valve kind of do when they like decide to do a trailer. They're always very epic, but they're few and far between these days, which is a shame. But I think the crazy thing is, right, that's where it feels like Deadlock has gone, where they almost fell into that hole of like the near future kind of cyberpunky, but a bit different, Overwatch-esque art style. And I think if we actually did get Neon Prime, it kind of would have been sad because it would have been so just attributable to X many other games that are all the same. Whereas, generic, you know what? Yeah, I think that's the reason Deadlock is so inspiring, is because you don't get that many kind of occult, mystical, but grounded in reality, but also kind of weird, like games. It's got its own sort of theme where, I don't know, there's not much else that sparks the imagination the same way. I think that's why Abrams is also so appreciated, because it's like the Mike Mignola, like Hellboy comics. The first time I saw him, I was like, oh, I want to play the Hellboy character. This is very clearly like the demon detective man. This is fun. But yeah, I think they nailed it. Like that reswitch, definitely the best move they could have made.
Very much. I don't want to, because I know maybe there's that person in the comments, and I appreciate you regardless, but me saying this whole very original, there are some stuff in there that's quite unoriginal, but it's done well. It's done well. I mean, Hellboy detective, well, that's pretty unoriginal. But there's a lot of there was inspiration that they've taken, and I think that I enjoy it a lot because it feels like a lot of that inspiration was taken from like when movies used to be good back in the day, like in the 90s. Like those are some really good times. But it does feel like they've taken from when do you remember League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, stuff like that. That kind of reminds me of Deadlock as well. And it was all when like Van Helsing coming up with what's his name, Hugh Jackman was playing Van Helsing. He was playing all sorts of stuff, but it was all like old timey. And I'm glad that they're bringing that back, because that was a really good era of movies and cinema, honestly, in my opinion. And that, a lot of that is inspiring Deadlock, and it does well. It really does well here, and I'm glad that they're kind of revitalizing that as a game. They're doing pretty well at the moment. I mean, sure. Overall, right now the game is in a bit of a weird spot, I would say. Because I think we have it's a very dedicated audience, and if you're listening to this, you are one of the dedicated few. You know, right? If you're listening to a podcast about Deadlock, you're already there. You're already there.
You're in. You're part of the Deadosphere.
You are part of the Deadosphere. And we appreciate you for that, because so are we. So are we, at the end of the day. But I think that is the thing with Deadlock, is that because we have such a dedicated audience, it is hard sometimes to sort of see the game from an outside perspective. Because I do see like the occasional post on Reddit, post on Twitter, about the difficulty of the game. But a lot of times it gets buried by other posts of like, what's meta right now? What should I be playing? How can I rank up from Oracle into Phantom, stuff like that? And those are a bit more popular. But you do occasionally get like, how should I build? What are the counters to this character? And I think those don't get as much traction these days, because most of the things are already known. But I do want to see more people like taking care of newer players. I think we talk about this a lot, where people do get heavily flamed, because the people that play this game the most expect that people have been playing this for a year now, which is sort of nuts.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because it is kind of a juxtaposition of, you have those people that have been so in it every day, like we have, where it's, it kind of feels like second nature, and you're so invested in everything. You're aware of all the changes. You're aware of what's going on. And it's like clockwork. Whereas if you come back, or if you're a first timer, it's hard. It's hard right now. And obviously, I think we were saying this before, where it's a problem that will solve itself, especially when the game sort of does go global, when it's announced and you can just click play and it's out there, and Valve are happy with it to just sort of say, right, go on Steam, play the game, Deadlock exists. But I think it gets a bit confusing, where it toes the line of like explaining to people that, I had this firsthand. It was a couple of days ago, where I was talking to Steel, like Josh Nissan, and he was basically under the impression that the game is out, it's released, and he was like, oh, it's just not doing well, is it? And it's like, no, dude, the game is nowhere near out. Like, it's still very far from it. The art hasn't gone in, gameplay changes on a regular basis. Hell, even if we look back 6 months from now, drastically different game. Another 6 months from that, overhauled game entirely, and it is hard getting that sort of point across of, that's not what I think Valve are worried about. I think they just want to make it the best game it can be and get everything in. Plus, you have the extra sprinkles on top that you can't even get into with those people, where it's like, let me tell you about the fact this is also going to be an Otame game, and you can like date other characters, and there's going to be comic books built in. There's so many layers of like, Valve have all these big ideas.
It's crazy. Like there's lots to really unpack, and I think for the uninitiated of Deadlock, I think it's fair enough to come along and be like, the game's dead. I actually do think that's a fair criticism from people, because they just don't see it for what it is. Because like I said before, we've locked in. We're like, we know that this is not an open game. It still requires an invite. It's hard to get into. It's harder than people make it out to be to get into. And there will be a massive influx of players when the game comes out. But I think right now, from the outside perspective, it doesn't look like it's doing too hot right now. But if you're one of the players who's playing it frequently, like anyone, again, I imagine listening to this podcast, you could see that the game is changing so much every single week, getting better every single week. And from your eyes, it's like, I don't understand why people aren't playing this game. And it's because I would say that they've got a very, very narrow perspective of what's happening. in the game because they're not reading the patch notes. They're not looking at everything that's changed. Like, if they look at the game, they're like, oh, all they see is what's currently there. They don't see what was there or what's not there anymore. And I think that's the difficult part about it. I mean, I read a comment the other day. I can't remember who was over on, I think it was maybe Dexerto, who was talking about Deadlock. I think they did a tweet or something like, the game's dropped 90%.
Yeah, I think I know the one you mean.
Yeah, absolute... just complete
lies.
clickbait.
Literally clickbait for the sake of it. Yeah,
complete clickbait.
I was glad to see that one get community noted with actually this is an invite only alpha test. Like, what are you on about?
It was silly. It was a silly post. But I did see a comment. I saw a comment, and that's kind of what led me to this thinking. It's that, it's not. I wouldn't say it was entirely on the fault of people outside who do look at this game and think of it as it's just not done great. I think it is a perspective issue, because the person wrote that if someone asked you to go watch 40% of a movie and then 2 months later 70% of a movie and then 4 months later 90% of a movie, would you go watch the rest of the movie in a year's time? And to that, I was trying to think about it. And I came to that conclusion, but also I think that's fundamentally wrong, because every time you go back to watch that movie, in this case, it'd be a completely different movie.
Yeah,
that you
it's
were
all
watching.
been reshot. Like, everything's changed. Yeah,
the plot's changing each time as well. So I just thought that the metaphor just didn't make sense.
Yeah,
and the reason it makes sense is because these people just don't see what's happening in Deadlock at the end of the day.
No, I think that's a good summary of it as well. I remember back when we were doing the charity event with the Red Bull Clash, right? Obviously, we were hanging out with Free Clicks Philip, good friend of the channel, and he was talking to me about it. He was like, I love the fact that you always do the before and the after, because he was like, that's the thing that people mostly forget about, where it's easy to look at the after and you see the change and it's there, but that's always there. That never goes away. But you need the perspective sometimes of just having that cached somewhere, like, this is how it used to look. Look how much better it looks now, because it puts it far more into perspective of like, wow, okay, not only is the gameplay entirely better, smoother, there's now wall jumping, which, you think 7 months ago, that was a foreign concept. That wasn't in Deadlock. You had the sliding, you had no ropes, none of these advanced movement tactics. Hell, like all these ideas, right, of like bounce pads, still relatively new. Ropes, still relatively new. The wall jump system, that's still pretty fresh. The fact that it's now even better with the double jumps and you can kind of just be limited momentum, but you can bounce as much as you want. All of this stuff sort of just seems like it's part of the game, but it never was. You think back to like that May 18th build, it was a very stripped down, blocked out concept of a game. Now it is a fleshed out game that still needs all the bells and whistles. But even when you say that, it's not really true to how the game's probably going to look in another year's time, where then we'll look at this version of Deadlock and go, oh my God, think of how like stripped down this one was compared to Deadlock 1.0.
Yes, what there's going to be a lot of changes still coming. I mean, I think we talked about, last podcast, I think it was, about how there's still so much to be done on the underground portions of the map as well. Like, a lot of that is just, it's never been touched, and I imagine that at some point that will get changed in the future. And we'll get to take a look at that. So I'm excited for that kind of stuff, and that will be a huge before and after dealio for us, because it's funny as well, because even in the patch notes videos where you do the before and after, it's usually the before of the previous patch. Like, I think people would absolutely go wild if you're able to pull some image from I don't know 6 months ago, of like a before and after from 6 months ago, even of just mid lane. Like, it's big differences. There's really big differences.
100%. And even like just the feeling of the game, the look of the game, and it's funny because being in it as well, when like we're sat there patch to patch, and those like we'd wait, because obviously you knew roughly like this time to this time every week or every 2 weeks it would drop, right? Yeah. So we'd be sat there like scoping through the notes, looking at everything, and some of those changes, it was like, where's the eclipse gone? Why does it look so moody all of a sudden? But then you go back and I look at the May 18th build, and it's like, man, actually, there's no atmosphere. It's just a map with a skybox, and that's that. Whereas now it's like each portion of the map kind of has a bit of a different feel to it in terms of the visuals. I think it works way better with a sort of setting. We got the Eclipse back, but just kind of different with a more high resolution skybox, really. But you're right, man. Like looking back with that sort of perspective of showing people that first build to current day, maybe next year or whenever it is, right? It'll be so sick to have that as a sort of a walkthrough of like, let's have a look at Deadlock's development. I am really excited for the day we get to do that because it'll be so cool to show it off to that extent. Yeah. That's why even with some of the new like model comparisons, I've been doing it where rather than just before the new model comes in, I've been showing you like, here's the first iteration. Here's what you've got now, because it also shows you some of the scenery and sort of the way the whole game's changed. And I do appreciate, at least, it makes so much more sense when you look at Deadlock's heroes and their identity and their theming. We never would have got the characters as they are today if you didn't have that Neon Prime early concept. Because it's like Kelvin, the way he came together, they kept a lot of the sort of things that were on his model, but expanded on it more to fit, right, if we rewrite him, he's not a spaceman with a jetpack, okay, this is how it will look, you know? And it's interesting to see what shaped the new identity, but was held over from how can we rework McGinnis, but make it so now her kit is all powered by like, you know, ectoplasm green goo. We'll keep the like rocket launcher that's attached to her, but maybe that's like a soul jar that spits souls now. It must be very interesting because they've already got things fleshed out that they know people like, but they try and toe the line of changing just enough to make it work, but keeping the best bits.
There is a lot of stuff like that, though. And I think it's a weird one where Valve, at the moment, trying to maintain a little bit of what happened in Neon Prime and then work that through into current Deadlock. That had been, I would say that was a bit of an issue for about, up until maybe, say, 2 months ago. I'd just say 2 months ago. Because I think past like that most recent massive update for item rework, we also got a lot of reworks in terms of what the map looks like, and also I would just say with a lot of the artwork that came through, even from just the items, I think Valve's like finally found like a really good direction where they want to take the art, where they want to take the lore. And I would say a lot of the previous elements of Neon Prime is starting to slowly wash away, right? It's getting rinsed out. I think this is like the couple of last passes through the washing machine until you know, the pink that stained that t-shirt, which is Deadlock, is going to be gone now.
They throw the color catcher in there and they're like, hopefully if we do a hot wash, maybe it'll be okay.
60 degrees 1960s might do the trick. And I think it's cool. It is cool, and it is unfortunate a little bit that we are losing that Neon Prime aspect, because there's still, again, I think I talked about it a couple of podcasts ago, but there's still some artwork left over from Neon Prime and some of those underground areas, but most other places, you know, it's all gone now. It's all getting pulled out, and I think that for Yamato, like Yamato, I think Bebop as well. Those are like the two big testaments right now still to Neon Prime. Like Yamato is in her Neon Prime uniform without like tiny little bits here and there and a color change. That's it. That is it. Those are the only differences. And Bebop has got a couple of shifts here and there in terms of his style as well, but they are somewhat copy and paste from Neon Prime, and I think that they're really the characters right now that are holding on the most still to Neon Prime.
Well, it's funny though, right? Because then it goes deeper than that with ones that are kind of the unsuspecting offenders, but it's also like Paradox looks different than what she was originally going to be in terms of that design, but a lot of her design still has those elements. She's still got the default like Neon Prime gun that you remember, like the old Mirage model had when he had the big beetle on his back. And then you can look at some of the others where it's like Shiv is almost literally Shiv as he was in Neon Prime. They just got rid of the rocket boots, changed some of the animations with the gun. Made it a wooden arm rather than like a robot arm that had kind of, I think he had blades for fingers. That was like the idea, where the blade fingers would reload the shotgun. Some of that still sort of exists. Mo and Krill even, where like Krill what is Krill?
Oh,
you
wait,
know?
Great Talon as well. You're right.
Yeah,
you're
Greg
right, you're right.
Talon, that's another one. But it's like Mo and Krill. Like, Mo kind of works because he's got that, like, chain round his neck. And you're like, all right, massive workman mole. Yeah, I can get on it. Like, he's a cool sort of tradey type. But then what is Krill? Like, where's he from? He still very much is more of, like, an alien kind of concept in design. So you imagine he'll be sort of, taken back into
I want it to be a
works.
little rat, honestly. Like a little rat.
A mole and a rat? That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, the mole rat. That'd be cool. I'd like that.
They do live underground.
I wanted to like a really frizzy, fuzzy type of character, with a little rat face on the back. That'd be my favorite. Because right now, it's just, what is it? Yeah.
Have you seen the ARG that Valve have been doing, the alternate reality game?
I've heard about it. I've not seen it. No.
Okay, so basically, all of Birmingham in the UK is currently overrun with 7-inch rats. So I think that is a nod to Rat Fella in Deadlock.
Oh yes, of course.
There you get a little meme for you. Slip that one in. 1-0 way.
I can't believe Rat Fella was like, what, episode 3 or something?
It was way back, yeah, like either episode 2 or episode 3, like one of our first sort of memes. It's funny that spread as well, where people like, because obviously I did some of the kind of fake voice lines for it, and then they got posted around, and occasionally you just see a random person on like the modding Discord or the Deadlock Discord or on Reddit where they're like, when is Rat Fella added?
When will Rat Fella be added to the game?
It just buckles me. It does make me laugh.
Like a little in-joke, and I appreciate that there are little in-jokes within what I would call a pretty insider game in the first place. And I just makes me laugh thinking of Valve like looking at this stuff and being like, who is Rat Fella?
Where has this come from? What is Rat Fella all caps?
Pregnant Lash, like that was pretty obvious where that one came from.
That one made sense. But even some people didn't get that. I remember, wasn't it Average Jonas? We were talking to him and he was like, what is this meme? And we were like, well, have you ever looked at Lash from the side? And he went, is that the whole joke? And we were like, yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah,
that's the joke. Unfortunate.
He does have a little bit of a belly, though. Like, he really does.
He does. I mean, I think for both Lash and Wraith, their models, I think, need a little bit of work, right? Because I think they're both models that just don't have eyeballs currently.
Yeah.
So,
the one I will say with that, I almost, in a way, kind of hoped that they would keep Wraith with almost sort of the white out eyes, because I didn't know initially if that was more of a stylistic choice, where obviously she's got like extrasensory powers, right? She's using like telekinesis to lock people down, to reload her gun. I thought it would be kind of cool if that's why she's so intertwined with that sort of stuff, is that maybe like she doesn't have regular vision, but she can see because of that stuff. So that one, I'd sort of toe the line of being like, I wouldn't actually mind if that stayed. The Lash one, I know Daisy was saying, it kind of reminded her more of sort of like a Pixar dad, where they just have the eyebrows rather than eyes. And I kind of see that angle. That also sort of works.
Yeah, again, I totally see both of them, and I think for the Wraith one, I'm on the other side of the street on that one. I quite like the idea of having eyeballs because she's a bit of a thief, isn't she?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
but maybe that's why she's so good. Imagine if that's why she knows what cards are going to win. She's not counting cards; she just sees through the cards.
Psychic, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It could be, but again, I think for that would probably work a little bit better with Pocket because they have a bit more of a kind of a sad background, let's say.
Yeah, true. A lot of trials and tribulation in their life.
So it's a case of they're blind and they're working through it that way. I just see Wraith as, she's a bit more of an arsehole. Right, she's
she's
got it
supposed
all
to be, right?
She's got it all going on for her right now. She's making a lot of money. She's doing a lot of blackmailing. She's taking over the majority of the mafia going on. And I'm like, she just does it all. She does it all. So I didn't really see her as having like that kind of backstory. Oh, she was blinded and therefore she needed psychic. She's just psychic and she's fucking everyone over.
Yeah, she's psychic and a badass. Like, yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, okay, so the other ones then that I think do sort of stand out a little bit. Calico was obviously reworked a lot. That was originally Nano, I believe, in Neon Prime, and obviously they kept some of the elements. I'm glad, like, you got the Peter Ball cat that stayed. Ava's cool. I've got problems with the kit, but that's not this conversation. But I like Calico overall. I think she was a very cool addition when she was finally sort of dropped in when they all came back, and you know you got some of the heroes that were thrown into Hero Labs. Grey Talon is the other big one. I'd say in my mind, though, the one that I'm most curious to see what they do, would be Bebop, because his lore where they rewrit him is very interesting, right? Where he is supposed to be this kind of scrap golem. He's a very sort of friendly, like British weird pudge type sort of archetype in how he acts, but he's just doing bad deeds because he wants to do good to take care of Shelley. Where it's like, what's he going to look like? Because it's a very iconic design that most people don't actually seem to have a problem with, which is interesting because he stands out like a sore thumb, right, compared to everyone else.
I think they just need to add a little bit of rust, maybe, you know, change the colors slightly, bring the oranges down. So if I make him look a little bit more junkyard, I think that could fix him. But you're right. Right now, it's like there's like lime greens in there and stuff. I just don't. I think that really
he's
works.
got like the sick Japanese like khaki shorts on. He's got all the like weird bells and whistles, which you've also noticed they've toned down a lot as well. Every character that was Neon Prime had a lot of physics objects tied to them, where like stuff would bob. They've been getting rid of a lot of that, where it's put more emphasis on just the actual models themselves. Like the new Dynamo, he's not got, you know, half an entire like Doctor Who TARDIS toolkit in his backpack anymore. It's now just like soup recipes, which is good, actually. I think that kind of gives more visual emphasis on the character itself. But I think, change the colors and make him look more kind of cobbled together rather than precisely put together to be like a battling robot, because he looks too well designed. I think if he did look sort of, you know, like a character creator, sort of, you know, you've attached this wrench to this and then duct tape it together, I think he could look really cool. Because the idea of a scrap golem where he's come to life just to like look after Shelley in the scrapyard could be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's what they want to go for eventually, right? And you're right. I am curious. I'm definitely also curious about like where they're going to go with that. What are they going to do to him? But I cannot say that I am less curious about Yamato. I think we already have. But I think that where you're going with this is the fact that we don't actually have any kind of concept art.
No,
what they want to do with Bebop.
The one thing we have is a single frame. I think it was from either the Geist visual novel that obviously was in one of the old builds, or it might have been from the Ivy visual novel that was in one of the old builds. But you had basically a slightly different face on Bebop where it looked a bit more like a skull, less duck face, because from the side it is a really pronounced duck face. If you notice it, you'll never unsee it. But he just had like an apron on. And that was it. I think that was the only change. But I could really see him literally having, you know, like a sort of inflated boxing glove for his uppercut. Just duct tape on, something like that. But yeah, that's the only one. Obviously, you're right. We got a lot more, I suppose at this point, quite outdated concept art for Yamato. Because that was, June, July time, 2024. Yeah. Yoshi showed some of those in the Discord back then.
And super duper outdated Warden.
Even older art. Even older, because that was just like a doodle on the side of Yamato, right? I think that was you that was like, is that Warden? And Yoshi was like, yes, it is. It was an old concept where he had a cape.
Yeah, because I was kind of wondering about it. I think the reason is because he looks like one of the police officers from One Piece. Someone's going to tell me off in the comments for not knowing what they're called, but I'll tell you what, I've never got through that 1,000 episodes, and I don't think I ever will.
It's still going, bro. Every day you're getting further behind.
I am getting very far behind. But yeah, it kind of reminded me of that, and I was like, I think that is Warden. And Big Yosh was like, yeah, that's right. It is Warden. Early concept art for him, but he looks really cool. You know, big cloak, and I think there have been some, again, like a shout out to the fan artists out there, because I think there have been some renditions by people recently of like what they think that would look like. I saw a really good one I think a week ago. I need to go find it and send it to you. But yeah, there's a really, really good one where they'd kind of traced over and then done what they thought it looked like, and he had this kind of witch hunter hat on, long gown, a long like cape type of deal. It was really, really cool. It was very, very well done, and I could see him hunting Vindicta in that outfit. So I'm excited for that one too.
Yeah, I think that will be fun. I like Warden a lot. Like, as a character, weirdly, I think he was always one of those that I never really gave much time to initially. And then one day I was like, I'm going to start playing Warden. And now I've just never stopped having him in the rotation, like, really got into his story. I think it's when you more sort of take the time to have a look at the breadcrumbs of story we've got about them as well. The fact that he doesn't want a wish from the patron. He just basically wants to screw everyone else over by removing anything spiritual and like mystique from the world and effectively just reject it, but begrudgingly has to use a little bit of what he hates, you know, has to use a little bit of that like spiritual power, even though he hates it all and finds it like abhorrent. It's an interesting juxtaposition of how he's written, where it's like sort of, because I think they even said they wanted him to be less of a kind of warden, more of a like a vigilante, right? Where he's just going out to do his own thing. And
he's a bit of a Rorschach, isn't he? Let's be honest.
He is, yeah, he is. Which I like. I do like that. You know what? That's another good one, actually. If you want that era of like things that overlap. I know it's quote unquote a superhero movie, but the director's cut of Watchmen, mate, like they translated a lot of good stuff from the comics. It's like 4 hours long, but it's worth it, and there's a lot of good bits in there.
Yeah, I think that, again, you're right. It's the same era, same type of thing, and you can see the inspiration coming through for him in Deadlock.
That was the one, what was his name? Like Lash always reminded me. Was it the Joker or the comedian? There we go. Yeah, Lash like reminded me heavily of him, where it felt like that was kind of the idea. Like, he's a stuck-up arsehole, he's in his own head, he thinks he's the best, but he can lay out a good punch and you're probably not going to step to him.
Yeah, exactly. No, that is, you're right. I think even just like character design wise, it kind of is Lash.
Very similar. He has like the little suspenders and stuff, right? Kind of tank top from what I remember. Yeah.
Very, very, very funny how close that is. But yeah, super cool. And I think that, you know, they could do a lot with that. I like that because it is very much like an untapped genre, which, you know, the artist can not steal from, but take a lot of inspiration from, and not worry that they're kind of taking anything from any different games out there, because no one else is really pulling from that genre too much to make their games from. So yeah, it's cool. It is really, really cool, and I think there's a lot of potential for them. And I do think that, you know, right now, I think we said that before, that likely the next big update is either going to be ability reworks overall, or more new heroes, because they're currently working on the map. I think I said before that it could potentially also be a big map overhaul in terms of artwork and architecture overall, but they've been adding a lot of like the map stuff periodically through these hotfixes. So I'm kind of more leaning now towards this probably is going to be more hero based, if not current reworks or just new heroes entirely. I mean, we've got 4 currently. It'd be cool to see those actually properly become heroes in the future.
No, 100%. I think it's a bit harder as well, where I've noticed like attempting to get a game of Hero Labs is almost impossible these days. So you can't gauge as much how balanced a lot of the other heroes feel. But obviously you've got 4 heroes right there, right? Where that's going to expand the hero pool a fair bit if we get like Slork, aka Fathom. You can reject or embrace the new name, depending on which side of the fence you're on. Raven was another cool one, where I actually thought he was very interesting in terms of kit and just overall theme. I like the spy, Blank. I think we do need a kind of like weird spy who's a bit crooked. And the umbrella gun was very cool. I haven't seen an umbrella gun before.
I think Raven definitely was my favorite out of the few of them. So cool. I mean, his ultimate is probably one of my favorites out of all 4 of those characters, because so awesome. a bit of a goblin type character with
Wrecker. That's
Yeah.
and that's so Neon Prime. That's the funny thing, right? Is Wrecker? I can't remember. It's Clockwork, isn't it? It's so ironically, it's Clockwork from Dota, but it's specifically the model that they gave to TF2 players as a Dota 2 item reward for Wrecker's face. That's what the like goblin face is. It's just Clockwork from Dota, which is hilarious. That it's like it must have been the asset of like Valve had the head model from TF2 and just went, all right, that works.
Put it in the game.
Yeah.
Put it in the game. Yeah, it's a weird one. I think the kit on Wrecker's quite cool, and they could definitely expand on that. I'd like for that to come into the game at some point. But yeah, I mean, there's 4 heroes right there. Which, that could be in a month's time. We have 4 more heroes added to the basket, which would be really nice to see. But we'll see what they do with it. Because we've seen, I think if we would take any of the leaks, I know we don't talk about leaks here too much, but if we take any of the leaks for face value, we have seen maybe a fair few more than just 4. But I can't imagine any more than that would be coming out over the next couple of months.
I suppose it just depends on what the intention is of how many heroes you want on launch, I guess, right? Because obviously I think there is a little bit of a misconception where some people glance at Deadlock and they, before you sort of step your toes in, because you're a bit worried it might be cold in the Deadlock pool, you think it's a hero shooter, but then obviously you realize, no, it is actually literally third-person Dota, with unbelievably smooth movement and like Counter-Strike rewarding level of gunplay. And I think that's the crazy thing, because obviously MOBAs, especially Dota, God, mate, what, we had a late 2011 into 2012 initial release wave with invites like Deadlock. We're now going on 11 years later. They're still getting new heroes, and there's hundreds. There's absolutely hundreds. And I actually think initially when we spoke about this, I think we were on different sides of the fence, where I think you expected bajillions of heroes long term, and I was like, nah, I don't know, man. I think maybe they'll keep it a bit more close knit. I think it'll be a little bit more refined, but a slim roster. Now I'm convinced it long term we're going to be like Dota. Yeah, it's going to be like Dota, where you have a couple heroes a year every year, and it will just always have new heroes and new ways to play, switching up the game.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason I said that, and I think it's because I came from a MOBA background, like before I started doing any esports. Like I was League of Legends, that was my thing, and I think that was
Riot Games making your voice crack. They heard you say League.
Yeah,
League of Legends.
League of Legends. But yeah,
only Dota in this house, boy.
Sorry. I did actually play some Dota the other month or so. I've just been playing it off and on now.
Just playing some ability draft.
I haven't done that yet.
No, mate, that's big. That's my favorite. Ability draft and the tower defense mode. Oh, so good.
Yeah, I need to give it a go. Do you know what was funny? I think that there's loads of opportunity for ability draft to be in Deadlock. I think you've been saying this multiple times.
Oh yeah, I think I've been saying this for like a year now, where I was like, please give me ability draft. It's the mind games of ability draft, when you're like, because obviously, if you've never played it, for the viewers at home, imagine it kind of like a clockwork rotation, left to right. Everyone chooses an ability, and they're broken up into categories of like, choose your ultimates, choose your passives, choose your ones, twos, whatever, right? But you could build the most broken character in the world, or you could end up with like the worst kit, and you're like, I can't do anything. I just can't. And it's like the mind games of who's going to pick what, who's going to snipe the sick ults. Like, it was so good. And I think it'd be booky and like weird with how the games would go, but it would be fun. Because I think Lamerate and that, like the modding guys, they were running ability draft customs like late last year. So it must be doable. It's probably just, when do you want to commit the development time to make it work properly?
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine, in the future, it'd probably be something to look at. Anyway, previous point before I got way sidetracked is that I come from a MOBA background.
My bad, go on.
of nondescript identification. And the reason I said there'd be loads of heroes, because I think that's part of what makes a MOBA really good at the end of the day, is that And it's also why I'm so surprised, Deadlock has had such a strong fan base for as long as it has, because it is just such a fun game to play. But one of the main fun parts of playing a MOBA, in my opinion, is learning comp matchups, learning laning matchups. Like, how does my hero play against that hero? How do I figure out to play against this? How do we figure out our combos? How do I counter that combination of heroes on the enemy team? Those kind of things are really fun, and what keeps a MOBA fresh, because you're playing on the same map every single time. And I think that, having more characters just does expand the amount of enjoyment you can get out of doing that. And I am 100% certain, without a doubt, that in the future there will be drafts. It's annoying that it isn't here yet, but I'm 100% certain there will be draft in the future. And when that does come through, I think a lot of those decisions of, well, how do we play against this matchup? And there's even stuff like in my head right now with Magician, which I hate this, by the way. I do hate it. But it will be better in draft, where enemy team picks 7, they pick Dynamo, they pick Lash. That's an incredibly strong combo, but one thing you can do if you're playing on the other team is you pick up Magician. Right, you pick up Sinclair. Suddenly you have half the cooldown Dynamo ult, half the cooldown 7 ult, and you can kind of mitigate that a little bit of the enemy team picking a ton of really strong ult characters. Well, now I'm going to use the sort of ult denial hero. So yeah, there's stuff like that that can be done. Right now it's a bit frustrating, because you don't have any choice. If you queue as 7 Dynamo and you get a Sinclair on the enemy team, it's well, I didn't want for this to happen, but I didn't know it would in the first place. But yeah, that's the one thing I'm also hoping for in the future, soonish, is just hero draft.
I think that's got to be just... Again, I imagine it's easy for us to say, it's easy to make, but I imagine that's one of the easier ones for them to code, where it's probably more of a choice. I think we spoke about this months back, where it's got to be a matter of just, they don't ever want right now anyone to be a permaban or those sort of picks to come in, where they want a bit of that random factor, so they're always getting data on things that probably are more frustrating than they'll be in comp play later, when you can isolate bans, you can isolate heroes, because obviously if everyone's just playing everything, you're going to get more of an idea of right, this interaction is incredibly strong, and you can learn from that. What's interesting there as well, what you were saying about combos, I always thought in these sort of games, it would be better if that was more evident, in a sense of how there's the banter back and forth between certain heroes where they kind of interact now in the pre-game and on the zip lines, they'll have a bit of a back and forth. If there was a way for any hero ultimates that are kind of set synergies, like a Lash ult into a Dynamo ult, if that was displayed legitimately as a combo, where it was evident, this is a two-piece attack, you do it together, that comes up with a combo, you hear the little jackpot sound, so players that do it once go, oh damn, if I ult those enemy players into Dynamos more, that's good, and kind of connect the synapses in a less obtrusive way, but a way where it's that was rewarding, I want to do that more.
Yeah, stuff like that would be really good, and as long as it just doesn't reward you with more souls or anything like that, it's literally just a case of
just a bit of flavor text, that's it.
Combo,
yeah,
happy feet.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Really
just
good.
something where it's there's Ogre Magi in Dota, and basically he does it where he gets I think it literally pops up with combo with stuff that you do. But that'd be sick. Just an extra bit of spark on the ult where it's you Lash ulted within this slim window of opportunity into a Dynamo ult. Good work. And you're well done. I'm going to do that again.
Nice. But it's cool because I think that they're trying to do that in a way, like you said, where they have those mini conversations at the start, where there's one particular where Holiday and Hayes go into lane. Hayes asks Holiday how's this going to work. I think it's Holiday asks Hayes how it's going to work. She says, I sleep him, you grab him. And it's cool where they do that a lot with multiple characters as they go into lane, is that there's a little bit of lore, there's a little bit of conversation, but realistically in set to that is trying to teach players how to play that lane together, which I think is awesome. It's a really good way of doing it, and I don't think any other MOBA really does that very well. Like at the start of the game, not only are you getting that nice bit of conversation where characters are talking to each other, but they're also teaching you like how you should be playing that matchup. I think it's really cool, and it's such a Valve thing to do where it's just that added little bit of extra care. Because I was watching the Valve what was it, Left 4 Dead 2 dev commentary the other day.
Oh yeah,
sounds really sad.
No, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
It is actually very, it's cool.
And you don't, I think that was the cool thing, and it kind of put in perspective a lot of things that happen in Deadlock, because there are multiple things in that game where you take it for granted. They're like, when we were getting playtesters to shoot zombies, when they were shooting up against walls, it didn't feel very impactful. So we added an animation of the zombie hitting the wall and then slumping. And like, in my head, I'm like, that's such a small thing, but it's the thing you notice the most. And then I saw like Back for Blood, someone was doing an example of that, where they were all just getting hit and they would flop over, and I'm like, that's my immersion ruined. But the zombies in Left 4 Dead 2 were genuinely scary because they felt so realistic, and it's just so many little tiny things that they added, which when you see it over a period of 20-minute documentary, you're like, holy crap, dude, that is a lot of hours spent on tiny things that kind of ramped up to something massive.
Yeah, no, the crazy thing is as well, I think one of the reasons that I got so invested as like Valve as a game development company when I was younger was exactly for that reason, where basically you'd play through Half-Life 2 and it was amazing, but then you could play through the entirety of Half-Life 2 again with the dev commentary, where you'd find the nodes and hear the explanation as for why that area was the way it was, why the gameplay changed, why the airboat segment became how it was. And like, you learned so much, where it gave all this replayability, where it was so interesting that you could, like, you know, you load up Portal, you go through Portal with a dev commentary on, but it was like a different game mode, and you'd find out so much stuff where they're talking about like, during playtests, people kept locking themselves out of this test chamber. So we had to change it like this, but this one was funny, so we still let you get soft locked, and then GLaDOS interacts to open up the door. And it was like, oh, it's interesting how so much of it they were like, okay, we've got to fix all of this. Leave that one though, but just make it like a fourth wall break, because it is kind of funny.
Yes, tons of stuff like that, and it was just interesting because there was even stuff like they had a dev psychologist on site. It'd be like that person was dedicated to figuring out exactly why those players were doing those things that you were mentioning in those circumstances, and they would help them figure out, well, how do we make a player enjoy this moment more? How do we get them to get hooked? And these days, you know, they use dev psychologists on how do we sell more microtransactions, not on how do we get this player to go to this cool looking door, which is frustrating to say the least. But again, I think that at the end of the day, coming off the back of what we're talking about with combos and stuff like that, I think Valve's probably more than happy to kind of be open to that kind of thing, because they're already doing it. And it's just these tiny little things that you just don't realize. But they do compound. They stack a lot. I would say that's what Valve's very good at. They're very good at stacking.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's so much of it as well that's very easy to overlook, even in Deadlock right now, where it's like, I've only seen recently people have started connecting like, oh, these symbols around the map are the locations that the jump pads will send you to. And it's stuff like that where it's like, they put that graffiti there to kind of telegraph, like, these are the locations. This is where this is going to take you. And it does work. It's subtle enough where it's just some kind of visual indicator. It's gone a bit far now in most modern games. You see, like, AAA games where it's like, we have covered this entire climbable wall in yellow hazard paint. And it's just like, all right, guys, it's enough of the yellow paint. Like, I am aware I can mantle over this wall. But I think they've always towed a really good line of subtly teaching you without you realizing. And that's the best way, because I think if you feel like I am learning, people get put off. But if it just clicks through gameplay and like the audio and visual feedback, It does make it way easier. It's very interesting how they kind of shape a lot of their stuff over time. I think that's why their game development was always so out there compared to other companies as well, where obviously they kind of basically changed the entire industry in the sense of you had everyone making these very expansive kind of open world arcade shooters. Well, not open world, but more open-ended in terms of how you'd navigate. And then Valve came in and went, no, we're going to make a linear story-driven game, but that one path will be so refined and so rewarding that it felt so good. And then after Half-Life 2, the whole industry changed, where everyone was like, right, linear, narrative-driven, story content, that's the way to do it. Like, that's the formula that works. And it was always interesting to me how they would come up with a concept, really nail it on the first execution, and then for the next sort of 8 to 9 years, that's what the rest of the industry would follow.
Yeah, and it's probably quite frustrating because I imagine Valve just wants other developers to be like, just make your own stuff. Just do your own thing. And that's what will bring you success. And I think that's what has been quite good recently. I think this is more of a game development in general. This is kind of an interesting podcast we're getting into. But in game development in general, it's quite nice that that's becoming more of the norm these days outside of Valve, because we've had Deadlock now, but we've also had Claire Obscure. We had Baldur's Gate 3. We're having multiple games like on the indie scene that are doing very, very well. And people are just like making their own thing these days. And I'm glad to see it. I'm also glad to see a lot of the slop kind of just not get played anymore as well, which is nice. It's all been priced at about £80. But yeah, it's good. It's very good, and I'm glad more people are taking their initiative that way, because I think the gaming industry as a whole is benefiting from that. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows over at Deadlock at the moment. I mean, there's definitely a lot of issues with heroes, I would say. I think that the map itself, as well as just in terms of objectives and the general flow of the game, it's never been better right now. I think in terms of like where heroes are at, there is definitely some that are better than others. There are some items that are getting abused a little bit more, and I think that kind of stuff needs to get changed, and it will get changed in the future. I think that as much as watching DFN sometimes is just watching the next most broken thing, it is nice to have, because it's good to see like what a lot of the pro players are doing in terms of, this is really busted, let's fix this, because it's easier for Valve to be like, maybe we need to sort Rescue Beam out in the future.
Yeah, it might be worth putting that one under the microscope. I think that is the thing, though, as well, where it's good with how Deadlock's coming along in development, because obviously I think the intention is long-term. The golden age, where all of us didn't really know every item, every sort of synergy and what was going on, everything was a bit more random and a bit different every game. And I like the fact that it did kind of feel like your laning matchups were almost down to the abilities and sort of countering the enemy team, but the itemization was a bit more roguelike-esque, where you'd switch it out each game, you try to counter opponents, you try to keep it a bit more fresh. Before the major item rework, it was getting a bit stale, where it felt like it was all min-maxed. It had become so precise with how it was going to be working, that I don't know, it kind of got a bit lame with how it was being played. It was like, healing right into Divine Barrier, into what's the next thing, flavor of the month every time. I'm glad now where there is so many different options, although we're finding those where the pro comp, obviously you're going to be looking for the, that min-max to win the game, win the tournament. That's going to be that way. But if we find enough of those items and tune everything so everything's in sort of an equilibrium, long term, my hope is that it will fall back into that balance of, what is the comp this time? How are they interacting? What's the dynamic counter picks, not only with the draft, but also with their itemization? And it keeps it a bit more fresh, where it would be unbelievable to kind of go into like a grand final and suddenly there's this entire build you see whipped out that's been kept in a notebook for that matchup, where it just works with the laning synergies. They've got the right comp, and suddenly you're like, what is this? Like, where has this build come from? What are we seeing here? That sort of spark of creativity, of like the guessing game of why it's happening, is something that I think long term the game will fall into, and I hope it does, because I think that's what will be so interesting about it, where you'll have all these different layers of, those moments of team fights being incredibly rewarding from an aim perspective, movement perspective, but also the builds themselves suddenly catching you off guard.
Again, it's going to be very, very good for the exact reason. And what you talked about before in terms of like, it was almost solved at a point, and it was. I think they fixed it in a really good way, where you can technically create a very well optimized build where you get as much as the main stat that you need by buying the amount of colored items for that stat, that category, because the way it works is diminishing returns. So the more gun items you get, the more percentage weapon damage you get, but it's like 20, 30, 35, 40, 42, 45. That's how it goes upwards. But I think that there's ways to do it where you buy a certain amount in each category and you'll get like just enough for each, where you're squeezing every bit of potential out of it. But that doesn't work either, because if you're trying to do that, you don't have a build that works. You have a build that has a good amount of spirit, a good amount of health, and a good amount of weapon damage, but does it have the item synergies? Probably not. So there's going to be a load of things out there where these builds will never, ever get to a point where they're quote-unquote solved. There will be stronger builds, but there will always be like other builds out there that are viable too. I think it's a good way to do it. And it's been a very interesting podcast, this one, because we've talked about a lot of different things throughout the entirety of Deadlock, and I thought we'd be getting on to like kind of more negative topics at some point about it, but I think that honestly we really haven't had to touch on them, because I think that by highlighting a lot more of the positive stuff, I think most people have been playing the game for a long time. They're pretty well aware of what sucks and what doesn't, and we're kind of just waiting for the next hotfix to come through. If it does before the next major content patch, we're sort of waiting for that at the moment, because obviously there wasn't one for this podcast to go over. But yeah, I think with the amount of times that they've come through and just sent out a good page of notes as well, Jacky, that we can be pretty confident that they will be having something cooking in the background, and it likely will fix a lot of our issues. Because I think most times when they've been throwing out this patch notes, it's been like, yep, it feels like you guys know what you're doing right now. It's no longer like I don't question the patch notes as much anymore.
No, exactly. I think I think we were sort of saying that last week, where we were impressed that initially those patches where it was every week, sometimes they hit the nail on the head. Sometimes it was just a change for change's sake. Whereas now it generally is. They must have found sort of, where to keep their eyes on, where to keep their ears at, in terms of this needs to be changed. This isn't enjoyable. This should be updated. And then you get all the extra stuff on top. So you get sort of the sandwich of brand new content with artwork, fixing the things that are a bit skewed, and then the bottom loaf that's just like, oh, by the way, we've made the gameplay smoother, we've tightened up the engine, we've attempted to fix the bebop hook again. But maybe this time it will be better. That's like
actually true.
The best bit.
Don't, please don't talk about the bebop hook. It annoys me so much. Still pissing me off.
I hope that, it's weird as well, right? The one that gets me with that does tickle me, is I remember there was the patch note, God, I think it was the 3-lane rework, where they were basically like, we fixed the creep breaking, where obviously it would randomly send where it'd send another wave, or they'd get like sent to space and you'd see one creep, like the dog from like The Simpsons, where he's just like, I must go back to my home planet, and it just flies off
on top of bridges. Yes,
but the crazy thing with that one, by the way, I was reading something about this. I think it was in the modding Discord. Someone actually thoroughly tested it, where they had like the AI lane matchups. The second there is a creep wave that has an additional banner creep that comes in when the AI somehow breaks and it sends in a reserve troop when it shouldn't, and you get another banner troop, it skews the lane massively. Like, it can win lanes off of that difference, even without having anyone in the lane, because of how much extra shove they have from the additional double heal. So it is very interesting of how much, I wonder, that's also affecting some games that you don't even realize. Because obviously, I imagine it's harder than it looks to probably say we fixed it. Maybe they did for that build, because I remember it was good for a while, but now it's kind of getting a bit weird again, where like there's wonky creeps coming in when they shouldn't be.
They do.
Stuff gets stuck, right? It's a bit interesting.
They do like sometimes do just a little Valve lie. It's like a little Valve white lie.
It's like we fixed it, we think. That's kind of,
That's what should be in brackets. We think it's fixed. But usually they just go, yeah, troopers should have no trouble getting upstairs anymore. And then it's just in the game.
He's inside the stairs. His head's just poking out. You're like, I think that's a troop. That looks like a candle trooper.
Which is fine. I get that they can't fix
It'll all
everything
be
at once.
fixed eventually.
Yeah.
Like, I suppose that's the good thing. Like, you know what? Being a CS player over the years, mate, I lived through the orange box update to Counter-Strike Source when spraying became awful, bunny hopping was broken. I lived through the transition from CSGO into CS2, which I still attest is actually a vastly better game and drastically has improved the overall experience. It's just people hadn't had that drastic change of like, you are forced to play on a new engine. Good luck. But with Deadlock, it's one of those where I'm kind of at peace. I'm in my zen mode. I'm 28 now, Blank. I've had my birthday. Like, I'm sat here in zen mode. Every patch, doesn't matter what it is, I appreciate just the fact that things are getting worked on. Doesn't matter if something changes that I don't agree with. I'm like, you know what? This will be good eventually.
This is Deadlock Diamond Hands. We're just holding out. Just holding out now for it to be fixed. Oh, I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I think we can play the patient game here. But overall,
I mean, it's the better way to be, because it's hard. I imagine I've seen it even where people say like, I hate this new model, I hate this gameplay change. I think at that point it's also, you've got to compartmentalize and accept like you are playing a pre-alpha development test. Things you love and you've poured your soul into for a year could very well be removed or entirely reworked or reskinned, and I think you just, as hard as it is for some people, you've just got to accept that and be able to like come in fresh each patch with a new set of eyes and think, you know what, really did love the way that this looked, love the way that Shiv felt, but they've changed his kit, they've changed his look. Fair enough. Maybe it just had to be done.
Yeah, you just accept it at the end of the day. Just let it happen. I think that things are going to change and it will be for the best. When we finally get to the other side of when that big green play button is thrown out there, which I'm hoping, I'm praying, fingers crossed, towards the end of the year.
Beta.
Well, not July beta, not July beta. I keep hearing stuff though that makes me think July beta, and then I hear other stuff that's like, no July beta, no July beta.
That was such an arbitrary, like the one guy that probably typed that out that was just
he's owned us all.
The July beta, like, yeah, he's tricked everyone. He's rused you all.
He did well.
It's one of those where they've never set deadlines for themselves. Weirdly, the one time they did set a deadline and release CS2 kind of ahead of the curve, obviously it wasn't finished. Like, it still needed a bit more under the hood. So I don't think they'd ever go back to that again. I think it was Gabe Newell himself that basically said, like, suck is forever, but time is just time. Probably butchered the quote, but it's something like that, where he was saying, obviously, the extra time it takes to develop is always worth it. Because if you release a broken product, it's always going to be broken in people's eyes.
It's late is just for a little while.
There you go. But suck is forever.
Yeah.
So that's why he mains Dynamo.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, dear me. Bloody Dynamo. Bloody Dynamo. I think I just need to learn. To buy on softball when playing against Dynamo these days. They're all getting a little bit too good at the dash, jump, warp stone tech, in my opinion.
Dude, the Dynamo skill level has increased rapidly. You know what is the hidden jiu-jitsu as well? Everyone's still on the stomp build hype, but it's kind of like it was back in sort of July time last year. Gun build Dynamo kind of goes sick right now. Like, I played it in a few games, dude. It goes nuts. It actually does. No, it does. It does.
I refuse.
Test it out. 100%. Test it out, bud.
I know it works. I know it works because there's a guy in my game called From Madagascar, and he would just do his own thing the whole match, and he was playing fairly decently as Gun Dynamo. And then anytime we asked him if he could partake in a fight or stop farming the jungle for 1 second,
he said no.
He just said, "Sorry, I'm from Madagascar," and that was all he said all game.
See, the thing is, again, but that's user error. That's user error.
That's what I correlate Gun Dynamo to right now. I'm from Madagascar.
He can. Yeah, it's fair enough. But like, you can still definitely have a huge impact as long as your timing's right with your ultimate. And I think it's more. He's one of the one heroes. Well, maybe him and Lash, but the cooldown on Lash can be quite long, quite short, long term anyway, where it's pretty offsettable. But if you're doing like Gun Dynamo build, it is hard to get the CD reduction on Singularity. But I think like, as long as you use your ultimate smart, it can be super viable, where you can still help out in team fights, but also have incredible burst damage.
I think if I was to build Gun Dynamo, I'd probably build superior cooldown anyway, just because I want Quantum Entanglement off cooldown as well as Stomp. So I'm getting the gun percentage bonus as well as the attack speed bonus from 2 and 1 at the same time as much as possible. So I think it's doable. I think you don't have to go all into gun in that case. I'll think about it. I'll cook something
it's
up
food
later.
for thought. It's food for thought.
But maybe I will. I'll have a look at it.
Everyone's going to listen to the podcast. It's going to be like 2,000 Gun Dynamos in quick play after like this.
Lining up.
Yeah.
In legions.
Soldiers all being given their guns.
Yeah. Entanglement out.
You know what's fun as well, though, right? I've actually realised, I think initially, as much as I did like the idea of the new item art when it was coming in, I know we're back on visuals for a sec, but I've actually really started to kind of just understand them now in a weird way where I feel like I actually have a better intuition around what people have and what I have at a quick glance than I even did back with the old designs. I think it actually makes sense far more now, where I can just at a glance be like, right, I know exactly what you've built. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I was saying this to you like a few podcasts ago about it, where it's a case of, and I could understand. I could also totally understand, because there's still people who yearn for the squiggles. They yearn for the squiggles, dude. Yeah, they yearn for them squiggles, dude. And I did not vibe with the squiggles.
The royalty-free assets.
Yeah, I like the new artwork, because I said, and I'm glad that you're also saying it now. It's going to be easier to pinpoint what people have at a glance, and you're not going to have to hover over stuff. It's like, I know that's superior cooldown. I know that's superior duration. That's Juggernaut. That dude's getting slowed 50% less. Like, you can see them. You can see them a lot easier. It's really nice. It's really, really, really nice.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's a testament to Valve as well, where obviously they're listening, they're looking. And obviously, if anyone's been following like the Reddit and our Twitter, I've been posting all the before and afters, because every hotfix, they're changing them drastically, where they're becoming easier to identify every single patch.
It's cool. I really like the fact that they changed a lot of anything that affects your stamina, affects how fast you're going. It's all now a unicorn or a horse. And it's like, even if you have no fucking clue what that individual item is, it's got a horse on it. He's probably going faster, or he's got more stamina. Yeah, that's great for new players, in my opinion. So I think if they take that same scheme as well into the future, and again, it's like there is a lot of bullets on that artwork. Probably got more bullets overall. So they've done it well. They've done it very well, in my opinion.
Yeah, you can piece it together a lot of these. I think even now with the tier differential as well, it makes more sense, where it's like they get more intricate as they go along, and it's been refined where it's like, you remember initially, obviously, we were saying there's a bit too much color. Like, green items have red and oranges. I don't know if it's a green item, whereas now they've really gone back in. It feels like they have kind of decided, okay, we've got a primary color and a secondary color, and maybe an accent on pretty much every category. So it is very easily identifiable of like, right, I know it's a vitality item, spirit item, no, it's a tier 4. I also even really like, do you see recently, I think it was a couple of days ago, it might have been June 4th, June 5th, something like that. They changed the artwork for Arctic Blast. It now has these kind of like diamonds in the corner. I actually really like that. And I was thinking that something like that being attributed for active items on tier 4s would be sick, because the active banner is okay, but they overlap a bit. Like there's some items that are imbunes and active. Shout out Echo Shard, where it gets a bit it gets a bit confusing. Whereas I think I like what they've done there, where it almost makes it feel a bit more impactful. You see that, you're like, oh, that Arctic Blast's going to be pretty cold. I bet that does a bit of damage.
Yeah, again, I think that they're just making things a little bit more visually clarified, and I like it. I like it a lot, and they're doing really well. Again, it's just the small things. It's just small things, like changing everything to be a horse that makes you faster. It's a small thing, but it's something that will really help newer players when they come into this one. Yeah. So I think that is a worry. And before we end off this podcast, because this has been a long one, and we're both still recovering. We've got so much to discuss. Before we finish off, I think there's that aspect for new players right now, and I have seen a little bit of discussion going on Reddit. And thank you to everyone who does have those discussions, because the game is quite complex at the moment. And I'm glad that Valve is still looking into ways that they can make it more simplified for when a new player joins up into a game. And I'm sure that they're working on more and more things like that in the back end, because I think that is the next step right now, because the map's in a really good spot, the items in a really good spot. Heroes need a little bit of work. We need a couple more heroes thrown in there as well before we think about anything like an open beta. But more than that, they need to make the game accessible from the get-go, because it is complicated. It is getting very complicated. There's a lot of little things in there. And I think the amount of videos that are going to have to come out on release of like explaining every little minor interaction, it's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot. And Valve just needs to figure out a way to make that onboarding process a little bit easier.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be busy, mate. We're going to be busy. It won't just be patch notices. There'll be an awful lot coming out when that day comes. But it's something to look forward to. And I think you're right. This was a fun episode. It's quite nice. It is good that I think the game's got so much depth to it now, where obviously we can just have conversations, even if it's not specifically about that patch or what's going on in the game or the outer influence of the community. It's cool we've got so much we can kind of ping off in terms of ideas and sort of thoughts of how things are changing. I do like as well, I know the comment about the horse. It's interesting that it's also, they kind of looked at it and went, right, spirit horse? Unicorn, It was like,
it's
that's
true.
similar.
That's so true. Arcane
Let's make it a spirit horse. Yeah,
so true. Yeah, you're right.
It is sick.
Wow. Very cool.
Well, there you go. That's
very cool.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That was a nice episode. I enjoyed that, mate. That was good fun.
It was. Speaking of artwork, before we close this one out, then Jacky, if anyone's got any cool artists they'd like to shout out, please drop them in the comments, and I'll go check them out later.
Yeah,
take a quick peek at some more Deadlock fan art, because I'm always on the lookout for new stuff, new people to follow.
And don't forget, of course, as well, you can always email us at contact
Contact us, please.
Contact at deadlockair.com. If you've got anything you want to send in, we do read through. So feel free to send over anything. We've always got our finger on the pulse of what's going on.
We can always throw them up next podcast as well. That'd be cool.
We could try and get a mailbag episode going. If we get enough, we'll respond to you. So that's always there. That's always there.
Right then. That's all now. Yeah. See you later.
I hope you enjoyed that one. Bye-bye. You can leave. The door's open. You can go on.
We're not big on security here.
He can't open the door. He's got stuck.
Yeah.
Oh. Right. We're going to open the door for him. We'll let him out. It's fine. We'll see you later. Goodbye. Goodbye. Bye-bye.